Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path.
We're here in Beitostølen in Norway at the Norwegian Summer School 2014, learning about the 12 signs of love. The keynote speaker this year is Tom Price, who is the author of a book on this subject and is also a musician. There is a quotation in the Baha'i writings which expresses the theme of this summer school. They whose hearts are warmed by the energizing influence of God's creative love cherish His creatures for His sake and recognize in every human face a sign of His reflected glory. Tom, would you please tell us about your upcoming book and your talks at this summer school?
Yes, the title of the book and the summer school is called The 12 Signs of Love. And really what I wanted to do was define what love actually is in terms of practice. We often talk about love, I love this or I love that, but we don't know what it means. And so I divided love into actions. What can you do to be a loving person? Because sometimes we don't know what love looks like, what it behaves like. And so I divided love into 12 things, and if you can do those things, then you will be a more loving person. So you learn to listen to people, you learn to praise people, you learn to look at the good qualities in people, you learn to try and make people happy, you learn to forgive people when they do things that are not so good to you, and so on. These are the manifestations of love. In other words, love has to have some way of showing itself, and these are the ways you can show love. And in this way we can gradually practice the little things that in total make love. So if you want to be a more loving person to your family, to your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your workmates, these are things that you can do. Because everyone in the world needs to learn how to love more and more, and this is what the world needs. This is the most important thing everybody needs to learn. So we try to break it down into little manageable actions that each of us can try and do every day. I selected 12 because I like the number 12, and there's 12 months of the year and 12 signs of the zodiac and all kinds of different things. I'm a musician, you know, we have 12 notes that we play. So I thought this was a beautiful way of breaking love down into its small components.
Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path.
Save us of life, all things of
Good morning, everyone. Are you all feeling good? I'm feeling good this morning to see all your faces. And we are up to, we've done 6 of the 12 signs of love. We're halfway through, is that right? Let's quickly review the 6 signs of love that we have talked about so far. The first is that you value unity over everything else, that you make this your priority, and that you say to yourself, anytime I have a problem with someone or a disuniting or an argument or any kind of thing that's not loving, anytime I have a situation with someone, that means I must have valued something higher than unity. I must have placed higher than unity my attachment to something. And I say, well, I have to change my priorities. The second sign of love is acceptance of everybody. Everybody you see, no matter who they are, and no matter what they do or what they think, you accept them, you tolerate them, you love them in spite of what they do. Adabaha says even your enemies, you do that. The third is praise and gratitude. To learn to be able to praise people whenever you see them. Make it a goal to praise everybody, no matter who they are. You say, I want to find a way to praise them, and always find a way to show that you're grateful to them when they do something that you're grateful for. But look for things that you can express that for. The fourth is very important. It's to see the good in everybody. To always look at a person and say, in that person there is some God in them. And I say God because God is any good human quality, and if you see a good human quality, you are seeing God. The fifth is listening. Learning to listen to someone, particularly listening to them first before you speak. And not just to listen by being silent, but to listen by being silent in your mind and being quiet in your mind and not thinking about what you're going to say, but listening to them with an open mind, as if they could perhaps be right, because you never know if you are right or they are not right, so you always just say, I'm going to listen to them as if they are right, and not immediately close my mind to what they're saying by saying, I've already decided that what they say is not right. The sixth is forgiveness. Forgiveness, we said yesterday, was the most difficult of all the signs of love, but in a way it has the greatest payoff. Because first of all, it is the surest sign that you're on the path of love. And secondly, we're told that all we have to do in order to make God forgive us is we have to forgive everybody else. And it's a really good deal, in my opinion. How many of you like really good deals? How many of you like to get a good deal? If you're Persian, raise your hand automatically, of course. But if you like a good deal, then that's a very good deal. Wouldn't you agree? Because it says in both Baha'u'llah's writings and in the Bible that if you want God to forgive you, just forgive everybody. But it also says something else. If you don't want God to forgive you, if you want to guarantee that God will not forgive you, all you got to do is not forgive somebody in your life. And so that's the sixth sign of love. And so we're going to move on to the next 6 as we speak about these. But I want to repeat what I said at the beginning of this course, is that these are not things that you are going to decide to do in your life. These are not things. How many of you are going to do the 12 signs of love in your life? Raise your hand. How many of you would like to do it? That's not really a good answer. Of course, it is a good answer. But more importantly, these are things that you have to decide to do today. That's all. You have to decide to do it today. If you decide to work on the 12 signs of love today, any one of them, you don't have to do them all every single day, but you say, today I'm going to make it a goal to praise somebody. Today I'm going to make it a goal to see the good in people. And just try and do it today. Don't worry about tomorrow or the rest of your life. Try to do it today. The dailiness is the most important aspect of this entire program. The fact that you try to do it today. If you say, today, I am going to practice one of the 12 signs of love, then you don't have to worry about everything else. You just say, I'm going to try and do it today. If you don't try and do it today, and you mean to get around to it, well, pretty soon I must get around. It's like a New Year's resolution. Has anyone ever made a New Year's resolution? You know, you're thinking about it, you say, I really am going to do so-and-so. And at the point of making that resolution, you feel really good, don't you? It makes you feel really good because you resolve to do something. But what generally happens? Yeah, a week goes by, a month goes by, and you're not doing it again because you made the wrong resolution. A year is not the right cycle. A year is not the right cycle to be making things. And a week is not the right, a month is not the right. The right cycle is a day. You shouldn't make a New Year's resolution. You should make a new day's resolution. Your resolution should be that today I do it, and then tomorrow you have to check whether or not you did it. That's the only way that you can do it. If you play golf, some of you raised your hand and said you play golf, you know that that very one hole is going to be scored. If you shoot 3 strokes, it's going to be 3. If you shoot 4, it's going to be 4 and 5. And that scoring on a hole-by-hole basis is very important because it forces you to try and win that very hole. You have to win the hole. You also have to win today. You have to win today. Everybody has to win today. So you wake up in the morning and you don't say, I want to be a loving person for the rest of my life. I haven't been a loving person in the past of my life. You don't think about any of that. You just think, today is a new game. I want to win the game today. I win the game by showing acts of love towards people. I lose every time I am angry at someone or yell at someone or scream at someone or punch someone or kill somebody or whatever it is that is not an act of love. That way I lose. You know, my opponent scores and I win. And I have to win today. My goal is to win today. When I was first studying the violin, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I started to play the violin. And my parents come from a kind of background in the United States where they think if a child wants to learn, you have to have the very best teacher in the world. You know, they come from a Jewish background. They think if he's going to play, he's got to have the best teacher. That's what my uncle said. You know, he says if he's going to learn, he's got to have the best teacher in the world. So they checked out and they found out that the best violin teacher in the United States was a man named Manuel Kempinski. Manuel Kempinski, if some of you look him up, was considered one of the greatest violin teachers of all time. He was the concertmaster of Toscanini's symphony orchestra. Toscanini had the great symphony in the United States. He was the concertmaster, which means he wasn't just one of the violin players, he was the head of the whole orchestra. He was the leader of the whole orchestra. And he was such a fine teacher that one of his students, a 12-year-old girl, was the youngest and first American to ever win the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow in violin. That's how good a teacher he was. So my parents arranged for me to go to this teacher, and he said to me something that even when I was about 9 years old, I thought was wrong. It didn't make any sense. He said to me, he says, I want to make sure that you play the violin every single day. He says, I want you to play the violin every single day. He says, you see me once a week, but the other 6 days, I want you to play the violin every day. And he said, if you play the violin every day for 5 minutes, just for 5 minutes, that will be better than if you play the violin for 1 day for 3 hours. And if you do the math on that, 5 minutes times 6 days is only 30 minutes. It's only half an hour. Whereas 3 hours is much more than that, isn't it? So I thought this was stupid. Even I at that age could do it. Now, at first I thought perhaps he was tricking me. He was tricking me because he thought maybe nobody can play for 5 minutes. If they start to play for 5, they'll play for 10 or 15 or 20, and in that way it's just a little trick. Maybe that's true, or maybe it's actually true. I don't know if there's been any studies where they've taken one set of students where they've played 5 minutes every day and another one that played 3 hours only 1 day every week, and who gets better. All I know is that he was the most successful and considered the greatest violin teacher in the world at that time. So this was his method. And this is Abdu'l-Baha's method too. He says, try to do this every single day. So the 12 signs of love are not for you to do for the rest of your life right now. They're only for you to do today. And then tomorrow you'll do them again, and tomorrow you'll do them again, and so on. So make it a goal here and now that you're going to practice these things daily in this school, and then when you go home, every morning when you wake up, look at the 12 signs of love, compare them to the people you're going to see today, and try and apply them, and just say, I'm going to win one game. The game is a day game. And when it's over, I either won or lost. Tomorrow I'll wake up, I'll say, oops, I really lost that game. And then you just pray to God for forgiveness, and then you try again. Or I won that game, and if you did win the game because you showed some love to people and you didn't show anything else, you thank God and you say, God, give me an increase in that. And the mere act of trying to do this every day is the only way that you're going to achieve these. Because Shoghi Effendi said, love cannot be acquired by any believer unless he makes a daily effort. So you think you can do it, you think you're able to do it, but you can't do it unless you do exactly what I said to acquire daily effort. So we're going to move on now to the seventh sign of love. Let me get my notes. The seventh sign of love is a kindly tongue. A kindly tongue. It's speech that's loving. It's speech that's kind. It's speech that's not cruel or mean or aggressive. Now, it's interesting when we read in the Baha'i writings about this subject, because Baha'u'llah over and over again tells us that speech, how we talk, is a very powerful force, an extremely powerful force, both positive and negative. It's a very, very powerful force. We carry it around with us at all times, those of us that can speak, and we don't realize how powerful it is, how devastatingly powerful it is on the negative side, and how powerful it is also on the positive side if we modify it. Let me read you a few passages from Baha'u'llah about the power of speech. Baha'u'llah says in the Tabernacle of Unity, a harsh word is even as a sword thrust, a gentle word as milk. The latter leadeth the children of men unto knowledge and conferreth upon them true distinction. So Baha'u'llah is saying, you have in your mouth something that's either a sword or milk. Right in your mouth you have it. Let me read you another statement of Baha'u'llah. He says, every word is endowed with a spirit. Therefore, the speaker or expounder should carefully deliver his words at the appropriate time and place. For the impression of each word maketh is clearly evident and perceptible. The great being saith, one word may be likened unto fire, another unto light, and the influence which both exert is manifest in the world. He says one word is like fire and another is like light. Inside your mouth, coming out of your mouth, can either be the destructive power of fire or the enlightening power of light. He says, therefore, an enlightened man of wisdom should primarily speak with words as mild as milk, that the children of men may be nurtured and edified thereby, and may attain the ultimate goal of human existence, which is the station of true understanding. And likewise, he saith, one word is like unto springtime, causing knowledge to become verdant and flourishing, while another word is even as a deadly poison. Now, there's 3 or 4 different analogies here now. This one, he says, one word is like springtime, another word is like poison. In another one, he says, one word is like a sword, another is like milk. In another passage, he says, one word is, what was the other one? Is like fire and light. Okay, so you carry around with you fire and light, poison and springtime. Do you see what? Sword and milk and so on. He says, it behooveth a prudent man of wisdom to speak with utmost leniency and forbearance, so that the sweetness of his words may induce everyone to attain that which befitteth man's station. He says that sweetness of words, just sweetness of words, can induce everyone to attain a high station. Just the sweetness of your words. Anytime I really want to hear sweetness of words, I put on a recording of either Hand of the Cause Mr. Faizi or Hand of the Cause Mr. Khadem. Have any of you heard any recordings of either of these two men? They were both appointed Hands of the Cause. And I have recordings of them. If anyone would like, I'll give you a recording. Mr. Khadem, when he speaks, it's so sweet, it's so gentle, it's so loving, that it doesn't really matter what he says. If he said, I want a cup of tea, he said, I want a cup of tea. It wouldn't matter. I'm immediately affected merely by the spirit of his tone. And it's the same with Mr. Faizi. Mr. Faizi had a lower voice, so I want a cup of, it's a lower voice, okay. But in both cases, I realize that there is power just in the way in which you speak. Forget about the meaning or the actual words, just the power. And Baha'u'llah says, show such speech that the sweetness of your words may induce everyone to attain that which befitteth man's station. I didn't know that just the way in which I talk can cause someone to rise to the high station. This is the power you have. Now, on the negative side of speech, Baha'u'llah says some very interesting things. He says this in the Kitab-i-Igan. He says, the tongue is a smoldering fire, an excess of speech a deadly poison. Material fire consumeth the body, whereas the fire of the tongue devoureth both heart and soul. The force of the former lasteth but for a time, whilst the effects of the latter endureth a century. So Baha'u'llah is saying that you carry around with you a very powerful weapon. The weapon of the tongue, he says, is a smoldering fire, and excess of speech a deadly poison. How many of you are aware that you have a poison that you carry around with you? That you have a smoldering fire? You're aware of that. The power of speech on the negative side, Baha'u'llah warns, is one of the great things we need to guard. In the United States, we have a problem with guns, that everybody is allowed to have guns. You know, it's part of the Constitution of the United States, and they can have loaded guns, and it's their right. And as a result, people are carrying guns around, and it's causing great problems. I think in Norway you don't have that problem so much, is that right? It's harder to get guns. In the United States, because everyone's carrying around a gun, a lot of people are getting killed accidentally, or someone just gets a little mad, and if they didn't have a gun, they would have punched the person, but instead they shoot them to death, or little children are accidentally shooting other children or themselves and so on. It's a big problem in the United States because the gun is very deadly. And so they're constantly talking about gun control. Well, when I read Baha'u'llah, I think we need to talk about speech control. That's speech control, because at this day we're all going around speaking harshly and rudely and cruelly and insultingly to people. And that, Baha'u'llah says, has greater power than material. He says the force of fire, physical fire, only lasts for a time, but the effects of the tongue, it says, endureth a century. How would you like to go to the next world and for 100 years what you did is still having an effect? Wouldn't that be a terrible feeling? Baha'u'llah continues. He says that seeker should also regard backbiting as a grievous error. Backbiting means speaking the faults of another person. It doesn't matter if it's true. Backbiting actually is saying something true. So it doesn't matter if it's true. If you speak the faults of another person, if your mouth opens and out comes your mouth the speech that is something bad about another person, he says, regard that as a grievous error. It's a mistake. It's an error to do it. You may think it's a good thing to do. Perhaps you think it's helping somebody else by warning them about the person. Perhaps you think it's helping the other person. Perhaps you think it will get you more advanced. Or maybe it's just a way to get attention, you know, or something like that, you know, to gossip. But Baha'u'llah says, whatever the reason is you think you want to say that, it's an error. Regard it as an error. He says, and keep himself aloof from its dominion. In other words, you need to stay aloof, stay away from backbiting when other people are doing it. He says, inasmuch as backbiting quencheth the light of the heart and extinguisheth the life of the soul. So the light of your heart goes out when you stay within dominion of backbiting. Whether you listen to it or whether you do it, it kills the light in your heart and it extinguishes the life of your soul. That's what it does. And so this is a very interesting thing that Baha'u'llah is saying. He's saying that words have a very negative power. Now, on the other hand, he says words can also have a tremendous positive power if spoken. So he refers to a kindly tongue. And those of you who have done the Ruhi books, you know there's a quotation that we memorize about this. He says, a kindly tongue is the lodestone of the hearts of men. Now, a lodestone is a magnet. It's a natural magnet in the world. And he says that when you speak kindly, it's a magnet to the hearts. It's a magnet. It attracts people's hearts. Not the meaning of the words, but just the kindliness in which they're spoken. He said it is the bread of the Spirit. It feeds the Spirit. Bread is food. It feeds the Spirit. He says remarkably, it clotheth the words with meaning. That the words are given meaning by a kindly tongue. Now, when I first read that, I said, but hold on. Words have meaning in and of themselves. Words have dictionary meaning. If I say a word, that has a meaning. Baha'u'llah says no. The word doesn't actually have any meaning. The meaning is given to the words by the kindness in which it's spoken. So you can actually take the meaning away from your words by speaking them unkindly. It may be exactly the truth, but because you spoke them unkindly, you took the truth away from the words. And if you speak in a kindly tongue, the words are given meaning. Now, it seems to me that many times when we want to say something and we want the meaning to be stronger and clearer, we speak more aggressively. We speak louder or we shout it in anger because we want to make the meaning even stronger. In reality, we're making the meaning weaker. If we really wanted to make our meaning stronger, we would have gone more kindly and more gently and more mild as milk. That would have made the words stronger in meaning. But we haven't changed this attitude. In fact, when I watch any television show or any movie, I find that at some stage the lead character, somewhere near the end, speaks really harshly to the bad person. You know, they tell them off. Have you noticed that? They give the big speech and they shout and scream and everybody claps and everything, and the other person is like this and they accept. It doesn't happen in real life. That never happens. If you do that in real life, if you speak harshly and you give like a speech like in a movie, you know what the person does? He probably punches you in the face or yells at you or something, but it doesn't work. Going harsh, going angry does not work. If you want to give words meaning, you have to go more kindly. And so this is a very important principle. I should also point out that we are learning now in the world that speech electronically also is very powerful, negative and positive, because a lot of us are now using speech in the form of electronics, an email or text messaging. Is that right? And that's part of speech too, because it's still using language. Speech, of course, speech is one of the most human of all characteristics. It distinguishes the human being from all other creatures that we know of. And even we have a month of speech in the Baha'i faith. You know, we have all the attributes of God. One of them is speech. You see, you have to understand this. One of them is speech. You think, well, if I said, tell me some of the attributes of God, you'd say power and glory and mercy and forgiveness. But would you say speech is one of the attributes of God? Well, it is. In fact, it's the primary attribute of God. It's the Word of God. The speaking. In the beginning was the Word, it says in the Old Testament. In other words, communication, speech, is a very powerful thing. And that's why we have a Baha'i month of speech. Well, electronically, we're finding an interesting thing in the United States. I don't know if you're finding it here, but we have a thing called internet bullying with teenagers, where teenagers will say bad things, they backbite or criticize or insult someone on the internet, on Facebook or something like that. And it's becoming worse and worse. And now many teenagers are committing suicide when they have internet bullying. I don't know if this is happening in this country, but in the United States, it's quite common now. And many psychologists are confused because they said in the past, bullying was done in the schoolyard, you know, in the presence of people, and there wasn't as much suicide over it. There wasn't as much suicide, that they would yell and scream in the schoolyard or have a fight, but they didn't go home and commit suicide. But here, somebody says a bad thing about someone on the internet, and they kill themselves. They murder themselves. Can you imagine the pain that a teenager goes through because they have received this to the extent that they would take their own lives? And so this proves that Baha'u'llah is right, that the tongue is a smoldering fire, it's a deadly poison, that this can happen. Can you imagine what it would feel like if you went to the next world and you find out that your words caused somebody else to take their own life? How painful that might be. And so we need to understand that this is a very powerful thing. Also, we need to understand that we have to control ourselves when we speak electronically. So if you ever write an email, when you're angry, you know, you're very angry at somebody or something, and you type an email, don't hit the send button. Do not hit the send button. Whenever you're angry, never hit the send button. You can type the email. It's a good idea, perhaps, to type it, because it helps. But then don't push that button, okay? And wake up tomorrow and reread it. I promise you, when you reread it tomorrow, you will not send it, okay? Because when you're angry, you say all kinds of things you don't want to say. Don't hit the send button. If you have text messaging, and you're angry and you type that text, don't hit the send if you can help it. Because anger, when you're in a point of anger, you're going to say things that you don't mean to say, and it's just like having a loaded gun in your pocket. Be very careful with electronic communication. You see, we carry around with us a poison. We carry around with us a sword, and we need to learn to use that for good. For good. Now, I want you to think right now about the way in which you communicate with people. I want you to think about the way in which you communicate with your children, the way in which you communicate with your children, the way in which you communicate with your wife, the way in which you communicate with your workmates. Are you speaking as mild as milk? Are you loving at all times? This is one of the easiest signs of love to practice. All you have to do is turn your tongue into kindliness. I remember hearing a story in Los Angeles. It was actually happened in San Diego, and it was a man who was Persian. Is there anyone here that's Persian? Anybody? Okay, it was Persian, and he had a wife who was Hispanic. The wife was Hispanic, but she picked up a little bit of Persian because she lived with a Persian man. And so anyway, whenever this man wanted the children to be quiet and sit down at the table, he used a particular phrase, yelling at the children, which I think is like betamak or something. Betamak, okay. Betamak. Okay, this is the word he used to use, which I believe literally means lay down and die, okay? Okay? But when the children were not sitting down at the table, he'd say, Betamak, he'd say that to the children. So she thought it meant have a seat, or something like this. So anyway, they had a meeting for Persians in the Persian language for the hand of the cause. And the hand of the cause came to the meeting, and all the seats were filled. All the seats were filled. The hand of the cause came in, and there was no seat for the hand of the cause. And out of all, everyone was Persian except her. She went to get him a chair. And in the front of the meeting, she pulled up, and she handed him the chair, and she said, Betamak. Okay? To the hand of the cause. Now, the funny thing is that everybody knew in the room what was going on, because they knew that she wouldn't really, and they knew she had a Persian husband. He was so mortified that he left the meeting, and he had to go out, and he didn't show up because he was so embarrassed. And she didn't know, but it was very funny, as you can imagine, because you would never give a hand of the cause a chair, say, sit down and you lay down and die. Okay. Okay. So we have to be careful, because what we do to our children, we scream in anger at our children, and we don't speak kindly, this can get out. And now everybody knows that that's how he talks to his children. You know, so they understand that. And so we have to be very careful the way we speak to our children, to never, ever, ever speak unkindly to them. Because when you speak unkindly to a child, when you yell at them or tell them, you're not actually teaching them anything in the words that you're saying. You think that you speak hardly, you're teaching them whatever it is you're speaking. You're not teaching them. The only thing you're teaching them is to yell at other people. You're teaching them one thing, and you're only teaching, if a child, does anything wrong, and you get angry and teach him, the only thing that you're teaching him is not the content of your words. The only thing you're teaching him is to yell when you get angry. So you might as well just say to your son, when you get angry, yell at other people. Because that's what you actually said. No matter what you said, you should clean your room or you should do that. Whatever you thought you were communicating, you weren't communicating that. You were communicating, yell when you get angry. And don't be surprised then if your children end up yelling too, if you do that. And the same with anybody else. If you want someone to not yell at you or not speak angrily at you, if you want that to happen, speak kindly to them. It's really hard to yell at someone if they keep speaking kindly back. Baha'u'llah said if someone, or Adabaha says, if someone tries to poison you, he says give them honey in return. Give them honey in return. Try this sometimes. Try really hard when someone speaks harshly to you to speak kindly back to them. It actually throws them off sometimes. They can't. And just try really hard to do that. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength in order to do that. But to meet unkindliness with kindliness is a great sign of love. And after a while, you can consider it like a game. Like, God, is that the best you can do, God? You can just give me Karosh yelling at me? I can deal with that. I can smile at Karosh. In other words, it's just like an opponent. You know, or he throws you a good curveball and you just say, I can hit that curveball if you play baseball or something. Just consider any time someone does something harsh to you, they accuse you, they yell at you, they criticize you, they do something, say, this is easy, I can hit this one straight out of the park, you know, and go back with kindness. And then you won today. You won today because you used a kindly tongue. You will find that this is one of the easiest signs of love. But do not consider it a sign of weakness. You see, a lot of us think, oh, I have to be strong. And if I be kind to someone, that is a sign of weakness. You have to change your mind to say, that's a sign of strength. And when I go rude or cruel or angry, that's a sign of weakness. Because I gave in to a part of myself and I surrendered. I actually played for the opposing team. So a kindly tongue is the way in which you communicate love. In fact, most of the 12 signs of love involve speech of some sort. Wouldn't you agree? Every one of them, like when you praise someone, you've got to speak. When you see the good, you may have to speak. In other words, a lot of them involve speech. So this particular sign of love goes well with all of them. Because, you know, whatever you're doing, you have to somehow use it through speech, and your speech must be kind. How many of you in this room have had someone, has someone in your life that yells at you a lot? That is very abusive in their speech? Maybe your boss, or your parents, or your children, or someone that you work with. Is that right? Or your spouse? Is that right? How many of you have had this? How does it make you feel when they speak to you harshly? It hurts, doesn't it? It hurts a lot. And so remember that you don't want to hurt other people in that way. So this is an essential sign of love, and it's something we can all do very easily because we know what kind speech, what gentle speech is like. And remember that you never want to hurt anybody. We're going to come to this as one of the other signs of love. You never want to hurt anyone. And if the highest aim of you is to maintain unity, because if the first principle is that you want to maintain unity, you have to remember that your speech is the quickest way to destroy unity. Your speech can destroy unity faster than anything else, and you may feel, oh, I love the person, oh, I see the good qualities in the person, oh, all the other things, I forgive the person, whatever it is. But if your speech does not show it, in the attitude and the tone and the manner, if there's not sweetness of speech, you're going to destroy the other 11 signs of love. Speech is a very important principle. Is there anyone here, before I move on to the next sign of love this morning, that would like to make any comments on a kindly speech? Any experiences they've had, both negative or positive, how kindly speech has helped them in life? Any comments or questions? Yes.
I have a question in the Norwegian language. And question, thank you. In the Norwegian language, we have some parts of Norway where people are using more harsh language. And it's a part of the culture. Actually, how would you respond to
Yes. Yeah, we're living in a world today where we kind of like people that are rude or cruel or smart aleck and stuff like that, because most characters in movies and television are like that. Yeah, I mean, and so we, for some reason, children grow up thinking that it's really cool to be cruel and harsh in speech, to ridicule people, to make jokes about people in front of them and cut them down, and then everybody else laughs and says, "Oh, good one." Well, they say "good one." You know, like if, in America, if somebody says something that's really clever, that's rude to someone, and it insults them bad, everyone says "good one." In fact, they should say "bad one." That's what they should say. "Oh, bad one," in other words. And we laugh at that. We laugh when someone is rude. In British Parliament, I don't know if you ever watch it on TV, the main mode of interaction is to be really clever when you insult someone, to say something where the words are really smart and clever. And if you can be rude and smart at the same time, then that's considered a good quality. So the world has changed so much that we value this. And so you're saying it happens in Norway? It happens in the United States too, and I think it happens all over the world. That somehow we think we're so great if we can be strong and rude and cruel to other people. So I don't know. So what are some of the words? Oh, maybe you can't say the words, are they? But there are certain words that people will use that are really cruel. Is that right? Or insulting, or swearing. Is that right?
more generally, because I think maybe this is because of the background, you know, the Vikings, they were harsh.
Oh, okay, the Vikings. Ooh. Oh, I forgot about the Vikings. Okay, so, but this is true. This is true. So maybe you have this in Norway, it's quite strong. How many people agree that in Norway there is a certain culture that believes that being strong and in your speech is...
The northern part of Norway.
Oh, the north. Sorry. Are you mentioning the faults of certain people? Okay. Okay. Well, this may be true. But what you need to do, anytime you see this kind of negative behavior in the northern people of Norway or wherever, you have to think, okay, what are those words? What do they do? Am I doing it? Can I eliminate it from my language? If there's certain language, in other words, if you see the fault of another person, immediately turn it back on yourself. They say when you point a finger, remember one's going there, but three are pointing back at you. So now we're going to point to the northern Norwegians, say, what are they doing? And we say, okay, do I have any of northern Norway in me? That's really all you can do. I can't fix the rest of Norway, but I can fix me. And so you say, well, what are the words they say? Do I have the tendency to do that? What are the kind of things they do? When do they do that? And then try and change yourself. But it is true what you say, that we live in a world where they tend to applaud and laugh at people that are cruel. In other words, cruelty is kind of highly prized in today's world. Yes, any other comments? Yes, right here.
Just like to add here, since I'm in the northern part of Norway, I don't have this mind coming all the time. But I think compared to maybe the people in North, I think they talk clearly from their heart. Because, okay, we have a mind from Norway and south part of Norway, but I don't know if they have minds there. So this is kind of, I think, the meaning of the words you're saying and the close behind as well.
Yes, and that's very true. It's not only the meaning of the words, it's what's in your heart and your mind and your feeling of love for the other person. And that can come across so much. The same sentence I could say two ways, and in one way you feel love for me and the other way you feel cruelty, but the meaning might be, the actual words might be very much the same. Yes, any other comments? Yes, back there.
I just want to share a story from the kindergarten I worked. That there was a little boy, 4 years old, that he was always hitting other children and being naughty with the adults, and everyone thought, what a big problem, and there's something wrong with this boy. So I asked the people to look away from his faults and try to look for the good things, because this was a very smart boy. and he had a great fantasy, and he was very creative. And when they started pointing out all his good qualities, all of a sudden his personality changed. And he became the most sweet and the most gentle and good boy. And I wonder what would have happened with this boy if the adults hadn't changed their attitude and started speaking to him with a kindly tone.
Yes. So this is a good story, because here it shows you if someone has some bad qualities and some good qualities, which this boy had. In fact, he had some very good qualities. But because he had certain bad ones and they were focusing on them, they kept talking to the little boy about his bad qualities. They said, stop doing this, stop doing that. It didn't help. And then through this guidance, which is divine guidance, it comes from God, says, rather talk to the boy about his good qualities. And the bad ones disappeared, because the bad ones were darkness. And light dispels darkness, so you looked at the light. So this is a very good example, and you'll find that this will work not just with little boys, not even with little 4-year-old boys, because most of us are still as immature as 4-year-old boys anyway. You know, all adults are like that. So we have to learn. That's a very good story. And did they speak kindly to the little boy? Yes. They spoke kindly to the little boy. So you can try this. Try this with your own children. Say, how many of you have children that you've tried really hard to get them to change a particular habit by speaking to them and it hasn't worked? Have you ever failed at any time? Okay, so most hands go. So it's quite clear that not all things work with little children. Not all things work. And one thing that definitely doesn't work is yelling or screaming at a child about the bad things they do. It doesn't work very well. What really does work well is what she says, is praising the child, encouraging the child, and finding a very gentle way of getting them to do the thing rather than yelling. So I agree very much. Thank you for that story. Who has another comment on kindly speech? Yes.
It's a special interest for me, of course, because I work with people expressing themselves. But I think we should remind ourselves all the time that our whole personality speaks and talks to other people. So if we behave gentle, we help our speech to become gentle.
Yes.
So there is an interaction with our whole personality and the words and the sentence that comes out of our mouth.
Yes, absolutely. In other words, what he's saying is that your speech is an extension of your attitude itself. That people can read in your body language and your attitude and your characteristic, your speech. The reason I single out speech is because Baha'u'llah pointed this out, that we need to be very careful about our speech. But you're absolutely right, that people can tell when you really have care and love for them, and we need to always be careful. That's very good, thank you. And that's true, that's very true. Be careful in all ways that you communicate. Because you communicate with your facial gestures, with your eyes, with your attitude, with, if someone's talking and people do that with their eyes, or you look angry and stuff, that is speech in itself too, in a way. It's a different form of speech, but it communicates. Some people say that body language communicates more than verbal language, so that's true. Who's got some other comments? Yes, right here.
I just wondered about, if you are, in your life, you always experience things which doesn't work. With people, if you conduct with a big symphony orchestra, and in this symphony orchestra there is a violinist who, whatever you do, he doesn't conduct as he should. And every time you talk with her very nicely, and at one time you need to do something about it.
Oh, okay. So, and you're using me as an example?
As a fact of life, you always get to situations in life which you can be as nice in your thoughts, but you are not able to solve the problem by only talking nice to people.
Yes. All I can tell you is that this is the guidance which comes from Baha'u'llah. This is the guidance which comes from Baha'u'llah. And he says that through him, truth shall be distinguished from error. Now, I think that a lot of us think certain things work and certain things don't work. And one of those things is we think that yelling or screaming or speaking harshly to someone will convince them to do something. We think this. And I think that's error. That's why Baha'u'llah uses the word error, that we should regard backbiting as a grievous error. So I think it's actually an error to think that you'll ever get someone to, like if I'm a conductor of an orchestra, if I yell and scream at the violin player, first of all, I can fire him anyway, if I'm the conductor. So he's not going to be too bad, because, you don't yell at your boss too much, But let's say there's a situation where somebody is not doing well. The best way to get him to really follow me or obey me is for him to think I love him. For him to, not love him, in that way, that I have great fondness for him. If I speak in a way that says, do this, and at the same time, I'm also saying, but I hate you, I don't love you, then there's conflicting messages. Because one, he wants to do the thing, and but the other, I'm saying it, and I'm his enemy now. So now he doesn't want to do this because he wants to resist me. He wants to resist me. Anytime you want to convince someone to do something, if you're also sending the message that I'm your opponent, then just because I'm your opponent, I'm not going to do that thing, even though that's the right thing to do. One part of him probably thinks it's the right thing to do, but another part of him says, but he's my opponent, so now I have to do it. Quite often, when you tell children not to do something in a harsh way, they do it more. They do it more, not less. Sometimes a child will come to me and their parents are so strict with them. They say, I feel like going out and doing even worse things just to teach my father a lesson. I've actually had youth tell me that. The parent is yelling at them to do something, and now, because they yelled at them, the child wants to do even worse things. So I don't think it's true that you get anything done by yelling or screaming or abusing other people. However, the other point is, you said, what if loving and being kind doesn't work? Now that's a different thing. We know what doesn't work here, and now you're saying sometimes this doesn't work. And all I can say is that's the best thing you got. You got nothing else. But if you keep persisting at it, it will work. Look at the stories of Abdu'l-Baha, where he continually showed love. Look at the governor of Akka story, or many of these other stories, and you'll see that Abdu'l-Baha just continued to shower his love on people, and ultimately it will work. Ultimately it will work. Just keep trying, and that's the best you can do. Some people you cannot change. You cannot change, but give them the best love that you can. And maybe if the whole world were loving to everybody, all of us would be good, just like that little boy, if everyone could be like it. So it's a good point. Who's got another question here?
It's actually not a question, but a comment. As you have been talking, I've been thinking about my experience from the World Center, and in particular in consultations with members of the House of Justice. Because to me, all the qualities of the signs you have described, I could see, I was thinking back in each of these interactions, and they really were perfect examples of this. And I remember the first meeting, first I expected that they would come with a lot of guidance to me, but they just were listening and listening. Maybe 2/3 of the meeting just listening, and then no harsh words, but in a very mild way, when we say, perhaps if you could do this, what do you think about? I haven't seen a command during 3 years I've been there, but
yes.
in the form of a question, and so lovingly, with smiles, and so.
Yes, that's very true. You're very fortunate to have worked with the Universal House of Justice, but it's very true that the Universal House of Justice, when they behave to you, is different to any other, even Baha'i body that I've dealt with. They are so loving and so caring and so gentle, and yet they are the boss. If they want to, they could say anything, absolutely. I remember when because I've worked on a few projects, the temple dedications in the World Congress, where I've had to deal continually with the House and certain House members. And I'm always amazed by this, because at first I was so afraid of the House of Justice, you know, whatever they said I would have to do, and whatever. And I remember one time when I was doing the World Congress, when I was preparing, they had written me a letter and they said that, you know, here's this music and you have to do this song, and perhaps you should consider such and such a singer, they said to me. And so I thought, okay, good, so I'm going to use that singer, and I wrote to that singer and listened to this, what that singer sang. And then later on, I heard a different singer, and I thought that singer would be better for that particular song in the World Congress. But I knew the House of Justice said, consider that. So I never said anything at all to the House, because they said, do this. And so then at one of the meetings we were at, in the break, when we were having lunch, Mr. Mitchell came up to me. He was a member of the House at that time. And he personally took me aside. He says, is there anything you're concerned about? Anything you want to help with? And I said, well, you know, let me ask you a question. I said, if the House of Justice said, consider such and such a singer, but maybe, perhaps I think another singer would be more appropriate. What do you think about that? He went like this. He said, oh, I'm so embarrassed. He says, I'm so embarrassed that we would tell you who to choose as a singer. He says, it's embarrassing that we even told you. You do whatever you want. He says, whatever you want, you do. We only said that because you may not have known the name of that person, and it said you may wish to consider. And he said, if we say you may wish to consider, that means you could do it or not. He says, if we really wanted you to do it, we would have told you. Okay? If we use those words, do whatever you want. And then he said, I'm so embarrassed. He says, if we could have done it, we would have done it. We would have been the music director. We appointed you. And I felt like 1,000 pounds was lifted off my head, because my whole life I was so afraid of people that were leading and trying to do, and they gave me such courage to do this. And so it's true that the Universal House of Justice, they carry this out. And about 15 or 20 years ago, I heard a story that interested me, because, you know, we have this concept in the world that leaders are very powerful, and they, you know, they have wealth, and they have authority, and they can tell anybody what to do. And there was a friend of mine who was asked to look after one of the House of Justice members when he traveled to a certain country. And so when he would come to a certain country to visit, and this particular Baha'i friend of mine had to drive him around and take him to various places and meetings and so on. That was one of his jobs, and he looked after the House member. And he had a friend who was not a Baha'i that he'd known since he was in high school. 20 years he'd known this friend, and this friend was not interested in the faith, but he knew all about the Baha'i faith. But there was a couple of days in which the Baha'i could not drive the House member anywhere, you know, to take him somewhere to wait for a meeting or something like that. So he asked his friend, could you help me out? And his friend helped him. And he drove this House member around the whole day, took him to this meeting and this government embassy or whatever it was. And at the end of the day, his non-Baha'i friend went to him. He said, I would like to become a Baha'i. He said, I'd like to become a Baha'i. I'd like to declare myself. And the Baha'i said to me, says, oh, really? But you've known about the Baha'i faith all your life, for 20 years. What happened today with the House member? He says, did you talk about the Baha'i faith? Did he teach you something? He says, no, we didn't have one word of talking about the Baha'i faith. And he says, well, then why suddenly, after 20 years, and not even speaking one word about the Baha'i faith, do you suddenly now want to declare? He says, because if that man is the head of the world religion, he's on the body that's the world body, and he can be so sweet and so gentle and so humble. I've never seen a leader like that. I have to become like that. And without any words of speech, of any teaching whatsoever, just by character and attitude, because he was in such a high position and he had such a humble attitude, this man wanted to become a Baha'i. So it shows you what the Guardian said over and over again, that character and behavior and humility speak louder than words. So you're very fortunate. Very few Baha'is in the world compared to the 6 million get the experience you had. But I look forward to the day when all national assemblies, all local assemblies, all board members, counselors, when all of us understand and value this quality of absolute gentleness, of never wanting to hurt anyone's feelings, of always being soft in our speech and always listening. And I agree with you, all the experiences that I've had with the Universal House of Justice are quite similar to yours. Yes, in the back there.
ببخشید من نمیتونم صحبت کنم ولی این زحمت بکشه ترجمه‌اش بکنید. یه استاد دانشگاهی از شاگرداش می‌پرسه چرا وقتی دو نفر با هم دوستن آشنا هستن خیلی با هم ملاحظه صحبت می‌کنن حتی با اشاره چشم دنیای حرف نمی‌زنن ولی وقتی دو با هم اختلاف دارن خیلی نزدیک هم هستن سر هم که داد می‌کشن. این چقدر دانش آموزان نمی‌تونن جواب بدن. خود استاد تو به خاطر اینکه وقتی دو نفر آشنا هستن قلبشون خیلی به هم نزدیکه. این نزدیکی قلب باعث میشه که اینا با اشاره چشم دنیای حرف رو به هم میزنن. ولی وقتی دو نفر با هم دعوا دارن این قلبشون اینقدر دور از هم که هرچی جا بکشن نمیشنن فقط دارن هم جا بکشن نمیتونن اون چیزی که دلشون میخواد بیان بکنن اون باز میکنن.
خیلی متشکرم. بله ببخشید من ترجمه لازم دارم. Someone help me here?
She said two persons, two students, they talk with each other and they yell at each other. And some people ask them, ask the teacher, why they yelling? And the teacher said, because I said, when they talk with another people, they are very kindly. I said, when two people yell at each other because their heart is very far from each other, and because they're yelling, they will hear each other. And when two people love each other, their heart is very close, and because of that they don't yelling.
Oh, that's very nice. So when you talk to someone in a yelling voice, that means that their heart is close, or your heart is far away from them, so that's why you have to yell. But if you're close to them, you don't have to shout. Is that true? Yes. So is that a Persian saying? Oh, that's very good.
That was from a school or something.
That was from a school. So that's good, because when you're close to someone, you don't have to yell. Very nice. I like that. Thank you very much. خیلی متشکرم. قربان شما. Okay. Who has something else they want to say? And I'm going to ask you a question now after we finish this, before we take a break. Any more comments on a kindly tongue? Yes.
It's not a very profound story, it's a small thing with good work. I work with, I have a small company and we are in the same locality with another company, so we're very small. And as I was saying, it's not only Norway, but everywhere culture is like a lot of slang, harsh words, and people don't really notice that probably will come. So I started a box with a name which is called, we started a new currency word. The currency is an empty Coke bottle or any drink bottle which has a pump, which you can give back to the shop when you get £1 for that. So it's a value in the bottle. So we started that each time somebody's the ugly word blocks out of you, you have to put the bottle into a box.
You have to put what in the box?
Empty bottle from your Coke. Because people drink a lot of empty Coke or
Oh, you put an empty bottle whenever you say that, yes.
So all of us have, usually during the day, there's an empty can or empty or half empty.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of, we have this 1 krone or 2 krones on the table and we are not careful with what comes out of our mouth.
Yes.
Oops, you owe 1 bottle.
1 bottle, yes. Okay.
And it started to work. It became very funny. other, and also you catch
okay.
myself. Like when, now I own the bottle, so I have to run to the shop and buy.
Oh, you have to buy a bottle. Okay. So, and this particular idea was invented by someone who sold bottles. I think they they thought, but that's actually good. Any method where you actually are monitoring yourself, or you're checking yourself every day. So let's try that today. Let's try. You don't have to use empty bottles, but somehow I want you to keep count of every time you spoke to someone kindly. And if you speak to them kindly, I'll tell you what. How about every time you ever speak kindly to someone, I paid you 10 euros. How would you like that? And every time you speak rudely to someone, I fine you 15 euros. You have to pay me 15 euros. How would you like that? If that was really true, if there was really a law where every time I said something kind to anyone, 10 euros just goes in my pocket, and every time I speak rudely, 15 euros comes out of my pocket. How many of you would be able to speak kindly then? Would you all be able to do it pretty well?
No, we're all bankrupt.
You'd all be bankrupt. No. But of course you would be bankrupt now but if you knew that that was the case, you'd probably speak kindly to everybody, wouldn't you? Isn't that right? So just think of it that way. Think of it that way, because that means that actually you have the ability, you just need the motivation. So I'm giving you the motivation with a bunch of euros, okay? But there's a better motivation for that, and that is the development of your soul. So I want to make that a goal today. Today, let's all really speak kindly. Let's say, out of my mouth is not going to be poison, it's not going to be fire, it's not going to be sword. It's going to be what Baha'u'llah says, springtime, or milk, or what else did he say? Or light, yes. Springtime, milk, or light. So look at your mouth right now and see springtime coming out of it. See milk, well, you know, don't throw up, or but milk, see milk coming, see, what is the other one? Light coming out of your mouth. Every time you open your mouth, there's light. And now I want you to imagine, but don't do it, see a sword coming out of your mouth. See fire coming out of your mouth. See poison coming out of your mouth. Try today to not have the fire, the poison, or the sword come out of your mouth. Try to have that all day. Everybody just as kind as you possibly can be, just so loving. And I'll ask you tomorrow if you felt other people doing it. How many of you think you can do that today? This is going to be the nicest school I ever experienced today. Everybody's just going to be so kind. And all you got to do is practice it. You practice it. It's harder to do it on some people than others. You know, some people you're going to find that hard in your life. But practice it on some people today. So I'll take one more comment, and then I want to ask you a question before we take a break. One more comment? Yes. Oh, there's nobody? I thought you were ready with that person. Oh, okay.
Well, it's a little story. When I moved into a flat with my family, and I have actually been warned by the old neighbor that the neighbor next door was an old woman, and she was really, how do you say it in English, very negative, very angry person, and we should be careful somehow. And I thought, well, okay, let's see how this goes. And we talked about it. When we met her, and well, yes, she was, you know, oh, you should put your back there. I hadn't even said hello. You know, that was the first meeting. So we just decided with my husband and I, let's just really, really overwhelm her with the kindness. And we did. And it took 3 days. She kept, you know, trying all kinds of voice to, I don't know what she tried, but she was probably afraid, I guess. And suddenly, the 4th day, she just smiled. And she was like, hello.
Ah. Yes.
She was 90 or something. She was, and you know, I can feel she had a troubled life. But suddenly she was just, you know.
Yes. I'm so glad you pointed this out, because Abdu'l Baha said one thing about kindness. He said, let us never be defeated by them not showing back kindness. Let us never be defeated by the failure of what we do. Just keep doing it over and over again. Sometimes, we do one kind thing and then they didn't respond. We say, that didn't work. Okay, so this is good because it's showing that they persisted. They didn't feel defeated by it because ultimately it will win. So that's very good. So we're going to take a break now, and everybody's going to be really kind and really sweet and gentle and mild as milk to everyone today, because that's your goal. You only have to do it today. Tomorrow you can worry about it. But, tomorrow you can worry about it again, but you just have to worry about it today. Just say, can I get through today and be kind? That's all you have to do. But I want to ask you something. When you are unkind, when you are cruel, when you are rude, when you are angry, when you do something, what is causing that? What is causing that? What is it that makes you do things that are bad? That's the question. I'm not going to answer it now, but I want to ask you, what is causing it whenever you do something? Somebody asked me today to mention all the opponents that I mentioned in the game. Who asked me that? Raise your hand. Okay, I'll have to look them up. But those opponents were all bad qualities, weren't they? They were jealousy and pride and ego and anger. Isn't that right? Weren't the things I mentioned? There was something like that. You have a lot of opponents in life. Where'd you get those opponents? And why do they come up? Why do those things come up? That's the question I want to ask you before we go on to the next sign of love. So we'll have a half an hour break and we'll talk about that. Thank you.
not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Do not be content showing friendship in words alone. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Do not be content with showing friendship in words alone. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Let your heart burn, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path.